The sirens cut through the sound of laughter, that sharp, piercing tone that doesn't belong at a child's birthday party. 1 second, my daughter was smiling under a string of pink balloons, her little heart monitor blinking steady green. The next, HOA Karen was storming through the gate, phone in hand, rage in her voice, and the police right behind her. "Ma'am, you're in violation of HOA Code 14B, she shouted, her eyes burning like she owned the air we breathed. "No amplified sound, no public gatherings without prior notice." It was a birthday party, for heaven's sake. A small backyard celebration for my 12-year-old daughter, Lily. She was a heart patient. Every year we prayed she'd make it to the next one. This time she finally felt strong enough to celebrate. Karen didn't care. Lily froze as the officers approached, confusion written all over her pale, fragile face. "Dad, did I do something wrong?" she whispered, clutching her chest. Her balloon slipped from her hand and drifted into the cloudy sky. I stepped forward. "You're making a mistake." "She's a medical patient, or her cardiologist even approved this." Karen smirked. "Then maybe she should have stayed inside." That was the moment something inside me broke. My wife screamed for help as Lily stumbled, her breathing shallow. The pulse monitor on her wrist flickered from green to red. 1 minute later, 60 seconds that changed everything, Karen's face drained of color as Lily collapsed to the ground. The party fell silent except for the beeping monitor and my daughter's faint gasp for air. As the ambulance siren wailed, Karen stood frozen, the queen of the HOA now surrounded by chaos she created, and she didn't know it yet. But she'd just lost more than her temper. She was about to lose her job and her reputation in front of the entire community. Before everything unraveled, that morning had felt perfect. The kind of morning you wish you could trap in a photograph forever. The air smelled like vanilla frosting and blooming jasmine. Balloons were tied to the mailbox. A big pink banner hung across the porch that read, "Happy 12th, Lily." For the first time in years, my daughter wasn't wearing her hospital bracelet. The cardiologist had given her a light. Activity clearance 2 weeks prior. A small miracle. For a girl born with a heart defect that had kept her in and out of surgery since age 3. She wanted a normal birthday. No machines, no doctors, no whispers of, "Be careful." Just laughter, cake, and friends. We invited a few kids from school, some parents, even a couple of kind neighbors who'd watched Lily grow up. Everyone showed up smiling. Everyone except Karen. Karen lived 2 houses down. The self-proclaimed HOA enforcement officer. She'd always found something to complain about. The length of our grass, the color of our fence, the ramp we installed for Lily's wheelchair years ago. But I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd let this day go. She didn't. While we set up the table, I noticed her peeking through her blinds, phone in hand. I told myself to ignore it. "Not today," I whispered. She's not ruining this one. The kids sang, the candles flickered, and Lily's smile was brighter than any I'd seen in years. Even her heart monitor, strapped to her wrist like a watch, stayed steady and calm. Then, halfway through the song, Karen walked out of her house, clipboard under her arm, fury in her eyes. She marched to the sidewalk, glaring at the decorations. My wife noticed first. "Oh no," she muttered. "Relax," I said, forcing a smile. "We're within the HOA limits. Music's barely audible, but deep down, I knew it didn't matter. People like Karen don't enforce rules. They enforce power." When she disappeared back inside, I thought the worst was over. But less than 20 minutes later, the faint hum of police sirens began to rise in the distance. And right then, I knew. Our perfect morning was about to turn into a nightmare we'd never forget. The first sign of trouble wasn't the police car. It was Karen's voice. Shrill and sharp, cutting through the sound of children laughing. I was inside the kitchen grabbing the candles when I heard her yell, "You people think the rules don't apply to you?" When I stepped out, she was standing at the end of our driveway, hands on her hips, a clipboard pressed against her chest like it was a badge of honor. The neighborhood kids had gone quiet. Even the music stopped mid-song. "Karen," I said calmly, "it's my daughter's birthday. We have a sound permit. You got the notice 2 days ago, she scoffed. I don't care what permit you think you have. Section 3 of the HOA code prohibits outdoor gatherings exceeding 10 guests. I counted 13. My wife stepped forward, voice trembling. Karen, please, Lily's a heart patient. This is her first birthday in years outside of a hospital. Karen crossed her arms, eyes cold. Then maybe she should be resting instead of blasting music for the entire block. You could feel the air tighten. Parents pulled their kids closer. Even the wind seemed to still. I kept my composure. We've been quiet all morning. Nobody else is complaining. Oh, plenty of people are, she snapped. They're just too polite to tell you. It wasn't true. Everyone loved Lily. She was the heart of the neighborhood, literally and figuratively. Karen was the only one who treated her like a problem. Then, as if trying to make a point, Karen pulled out her phone and began filming. This will make a fine HOA report, she said, her voice dripping with satisfaction. Let's see what code enforcement thinks of this. Lily, who had been standing beside her cake, stepped forward nervously. Mrs. Karen, I'm sorry if I did something wrong. Karen turned on her like a hawk. You did. You disturbed the peace. The color drained from my daughter's face. She clutched her chest, taking slow breaths, the kind she'd been taught for when her heart raced. That's when I stepped between them. Enough. Go back to your house, Karen. She smiled, that tight, poisonous kind of smile that meant she'd already won. Fine, she said softly. But don't say I didn't warn you. She walked off, phone still recording, whispering something into it. I couldn't hear the words, but I caught one phrase. Noise violation, police en route. The kids went back inside quietly. The laughter was gone, replaced by the uneasy rhythm of a distant siren approaching. And that was Karen's first strike. Not just against the party, but against the peace we'd spent years trying to protect. By the time the police cruiser rolled up to our curb, the party had turned eerily quiet. The music stopped. Parents exchanged awkward glances, pretending to check their phones. Kids clutched their cupcakes, unsure if they were supposed to run or stay still. Karen was already out front, waving her arms dramatically like she was directing traffic. Officer, over here, she called, her tone trembling with fake concern. They're refusing to comply with HOA regulations. I told them to shut it down, but they ignored me. The officer, a young man barely 30, stepped out looking more confused than concerned. Ma'am, this is a kid's birthday party, he said, his voice calm. Are you sure this is a police matter? Karen gasped like she'd been insulted. A police matter? There's amplified noise, public disturbance, and I believe they're hosting without a permit. This neighborhood has standards. I stepped forward, holding my hands out. Officer, we filed for a temporary permit with the city. You can check the record. My daughter's medically fragile. This party means everything to her. Karen scoffed. Oh, please. Everyone has an excuse these days, my wife's voice cracked. She's a heart patient, Karen. She's had 4 surgeries. But Karen wasn't listening. She turned to the officer, lowering her voice. Honestly, I think they're exaggerating it for sympathy. Look at the noise, the crowd. Does that look like a sick child to you? The officer's patience wore thin. Ma'am, please step back. But Karen didn't. She stepped closer, to my daughter. You're not special, she hissed. Rules are rules. That's when Lily's heart monitor beeped. Once, then again, faster. The color drained from her face. Lily, sweetheart, sit down, I shouted, rushing to her side. But Karen grabbed her arm, actually grabbed her, as if she were stopping a criminal. The officer froze. Ma'am, let go of the girl! Too late. The sudden pull made Lily stumble, her chest rising unevenly. Her monitor alarmed, the sound shrill enough to make everyone freeze. My wife screamed her name. Karen finally released her, muttering, "Overdramatic nonsense!" But the moment she said it, Lily dropped to her knees, gasping for air. Parents rushed forward. The officer called for an ambulance. I held my daughter as her little body trembled in my arms, her lips turning pale. And in that moment, as I looked up through tears, Karen's expression changed. Not remorse, not fear, just realization that the phone in my pocket had been recording since she arrived. That was the moment she lost control. And 1 minute later, She'd lose everything else. Everything after that moment blurred together. The flashing red lights, the voices shouting for space, the squeal of the stretcher wheels on pavement. But one thing stayed sharp in my mind: Karen's face. She stood frozen on the lawn as the paramedics rushed past, her phone still in her hand, still recording, as if this were a show instead of my daughter's life on the line. "Pulse unstable," one medic said. "Get her on oxygen now." I knelt beside Lily, holding her hand as her small fingers twitched. Her heart monitor screamed a flat, uneven rhythm. My wife sobbed into her hands, whispering, "Please, God, not again." The officer who had responded finally turned to Karen, his voice low and furious. "Ma'am, you need to step back now." Karen blinked, snapping out of her daze. "I didn't touch her. She just overreacted." I rose slowly, my hands trembling, not from fear, but from something deeper, colder. "You grabbed a child with a heart condition. You caused this," she tried to backpedal. "I was enforcing the rules." "Rules don't give you the right to hurt someone," I said, voice shaking with rage. "You wanted to humiliate us, and now look at what you've done." For the first time, Karen looked nervous. The police officer took her phone from her hand and examined it. On screen, the video she'd been recording was still playing, and it caught everything. Her shove, her words, her disdain. The officer's tone hardened. "Ma'am, I'm placing you under arrest for endangerment and physical contact with a minor. You have the right to remain silent." The neighborhood erupted into whispers. Parents who had once stayed quiet now shouted, "You went too far, Karen!" "She's just a little girl." As the handcuffs clicked, Karen looked around wildly, her voice breaking. "You can't do this. I'm the HOA president." "Not anymore," the officer muttered. The ambulance doors closed with my daughter inside, lights flickering like desperate hope. I climbed in beside her, holding her hand as the siren wailed down the street. Through the rear window, I saw Karen standing cuffed beside her perfect hedges, makeup streaked, shouting to no one. For years, she'd hidden behind rules, regulations, and fake authority. But this time, the rulebook couldn't save her, because the world had just seen who she really was. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and fear. Machines beeped in steady rhythm as Lily lay hooked to monitors, a thin oxygen tube beneath her nose. My wife sat at her bedside, holding her hand like she could protect her from everything outside those walls. I stood by the window, watching the city lights blur through the glass, my jaw locked tight. I'd spent years trying to believe in order, in community, in fairness, but Karen had turned every rule into a weapon, and now she'd hurt the one person who never hurt anyone. That night, I made a decision. Karen thought the arrest had ended with her being cuffed. But that was just the beginning. When I got home, I checked the footage on my phone. The video had captured everything. Karen screaming at a sick child, grabbing her arm, mocking her condition, and the moment Lily's monitor went wild. But what made it worse, what turned it from arrogance into cruelty, was the smirk on Karen's face right before my daughter collapsed. I sent the clip to 3 people: the HOA board vice president, our local news station, and a lawyer friend who specialized in community liability. Within 20 minutes, my phone lit up. "Mark, this is going to blow up," my lawyer said. "She's not just facing a misdemeanor. She'll lose her position, maybe her entire HOA contract." I leaned back in my chair. Good. By sunrise, the video had spread online. The title alone made people furious. HOA president assaults heart patient girl at birthday party. Thousands of comments poured in. Neighbors, strangers, even former residents who said Karen had bullied them too. The story went viral before I'd even finished my first cup of coffee. The HOA board called an emergency meeting that evening. I didn't attend, but I didn't have to. My phone buzzed again. A message from one of the board members. "She's suspended indefinitely. Investigation pending." The board's furious. I looked at the hospital bed where my daughter slept, pale but stable. I brushed a strand of hair from her forehead and whispered, "You're stronger than she'll ever be, kiddo." Outside the room, the TV in the waiting area replayed the news clip, Karen being led away in cuffs, crying, begging the officer to just talk this out. For years, She'd made everyone else feel small. Now she was the one shrinking under the weight of her own arrogance. And the irony? She'd filed the report that brought the police. But my video was the evidence that took her down. That was the turning point. Not just for my daughter's justice, but for every family Karen had ever terrorized. The hospital lights never dimmed that night. The rhythmic beep of Lily's heart monitor filled the silence, a sound that used to comfort me. Now it just reminded me how close we'd come to losing her. The doctor said it was a cardiac episode triggered by emotional distress. In simple words, stress almost killed her, all because of a woman who couldn't stand a child's laughter. At 2 a.m., as the machines hummed, I stepped out into the hallway for air. The automatic doors slid open to a cold night breeze that carried the faint scent of rain. That's when my phone buzzed again, this time with a flood of notifications. The video I'd sent had gone national. Local news anchors, online bloggers, even advocacy groups for disabled children were sharing it. The headline on one outlet read, "HOA president causes medical emergency. Heart patient child hospitalized after harassment." My blood ran cold as I watched the clip loop. The sight of my daughter clutching her chest, Karen's voice sneering, "You're not special," and then the sound of that heart monitor beeping. It was haunting. But it was also justice in motion. By morning, Karen's name was everywhere. Her employer, a real estate management firm, released a public statement. "We do not tolerate misconduct or cruelty. Ms. Whitmore has been placed on immediate suspension pending investigation." Her picture, once on the company website under Neighborhood Relations Director, vanished within hours. When I got back to Lily's room, my wife had the news on mute, tears running down her cheeks. "She's awake," she whispered. Lily looked fragile, her skin pale against the hospital sheets, but she smiled faintly when she saw me. "Dad," she murmured, "did the party stop?" I forced a smile. "Only for now. We'll finish it when you're home," she nodded weakly. "Did Mrs. Karen get mad?" I knelt beside her. "She did worse than that. But you don't have to worry, she can't hurt you anymore." She blinked slowly, then whispered, "Promise?" I squeezed her hand. "On my life." Hours later, the hospital waiting room was packed. Reporters, neighbors, even the police chief came to speak with us. The officer from that day, the one who'd arrested Karen, approached quietly. "I wanted you to know," he said, voice firm. "The DA's filing charges. We reviewed the footage. There's no question. It's assault and endangerment. She's not walking away from this." For the first time in days, I exhaled. That afternoon, as Lily rested, I stepped outside to see a small crowd forming by the hospital entrance. Neighbors held posters reading "Justice for Lily" and "End HOA Abuse." Strangers brought flowers and cards, and across every phone screen, one moment replayed again and again, Karen's arrogant expression shifting to panic as the officer took her phone and said, "Ma'am, you're under arrest." She had spent years weaponizing rules against good people. But in 1 minute, the same minute she mocked a heart patient, she'd destroyed her entire career. As I watched the crowd gather for my daughter, I realized something powerful. Justice didn't always come in courtrooms. Sometimes it came through truth. Broadcast in the open, unfiltered, and undeniable, Karen had tried to humiliate us in public. Instead, her own cruelty became the reason the world finally saw who she was. And the best part? Lily didn't know it yet. But the whole town was already planning something special for her return. By sunrise the next morning, Cedar Ridge wasn't the same neighborhood anymore. The once silent residents, the ones who used to nod politely to Karen, too afraid to challenge her, now stood outside her house, holding cameras. Reporters parked vans along the curb, their antennas piercing the sky. The HOA Queen's fortress of fear had become a circus of shame. Her perfect lawn, trimmed to military precision, was littered with "for sale" signs that angry neighbors had stuck there as a joke. The HOA Facebook page she controlled was gone, replaced by screenshots of her mugshot, shared thousands of times with captions like "Justice for Lily" and "No more HOA tyrants." I didn't feel joy. Not yet, just a deep, stunned quiet. At the hospital, Lily's condition stabilized. The doctors said her heart had recovered thanks to quick response, but the emotional trauma might take longer. She was quiet, too quiet, just staring out the window as get-well cards and balloons filled her room. My wife and I took turns reading the messages aloud. "You're our hero, Lily. You made the whole world stand up for kindness." But nothing hit me harder than one letter that arrived in a plain envelope. It was from one of Karen's former co-workers, anonymous, typed, short. It said, "We all knew what she was like. You finally stopped her. Thank you." That's when I realized this wasn't just about us. It was about everyone she'd bullied, silenced, and shamed under the mask of rules. That evening, the HOA board called me directly. "Mr. Hall," the vice president said, "the board has officially terminated Karen's position. She's banned from community involvement permanently. We also plan to honor Lily with a public apology and medical support fund." I paused, gripping the phone tight. That's the least she deserves. Then he added softly, "We've also decided to rename the neighborhood park in her honor, Lily's Garden." I couldn't speak for a moment. I just looked at my daughter sleeping peacefully, color slowly returning to her cheeks. Meanwhile, Karen's downfall continued to spiral. Her employer confirmed her firing. Her home was vandalized with chalk messages, "Hope your heart learns compassion." She tried to post a teary apology video online, but it only made things worse. People saw it for what it was: crocodile tears. The same power she'd once wielded to humiliate others had turned into her punishment. And as the sun dipped behind the hospital, I finally let myself feel something I hadn't felt in months: relief. Because for once, the story didn't end with a victim. It ended with truth breaking through the noise. 2 days after the incident, the police investigation officially opened, and this time the roles were reversed. Karen wasn't the one calling officers to enforce neighborhood order. She was the one under investigation for criminal negligence, assault, and falsifying reports. Detective Ramos, a veteran officer with a calm but razor-sharp presence, met me at the hospital. "Mr. Hall," he said, flipping open his notepad, "we reviewed your footage, the officer's body cam, and eyewitness statements. It's airtight. She grabbed your daughter, verbally taunted her, and obstructed emergency care. There's no spin that can save her now." I exhaled slowly. "So what happens next?" "She'll face court within the week," he said. "Her attorney's already scrambling for damage control, but the department is recommending full charges." Meanwhile, the hospital hallway was buzzing with kindness. Nurses brought Lily small gifts, stuffed animals, balloons, even a heart-shaped pillow signed by staff. Reporters requested interviews, but we turned them down. My only focus was my daughter's recovery. That night, I walked outside to get some air and saw the same officer who had arrested Karen standing by his cruiser. He nodded at me. "You know," he said, "I've been doing this job for 12 years, and I've never seen someone go from respected to despised that fast. The second the footage hit social media, she lost everything." "She earned it," I said quietly. He nodded. "The DA's office wants your statement on record, but between you and me, they already have more than enough." Back upstairs, Lily was awake again, coloring with crayons a nurse had given her. "Dad," she said softly, "did the police take Mrs. Karen away for good?" I knelt beside her. "They did, honey. She can't hurt anyone anymore." She smiled faintly, her voice barely a whisper. "Then, maybe she'll learn to be nice." That line hit harder than anything Karen ever said. My daughter, who nearly died because of cruelty, still believed in kindness. The next morning, the hospital released a public statement thanking first responders and confirming that Lily's recovery was steady. The media storm intensified, but for once, it was all for the right reasons. One headline read, "Heart patient girl becomes symbol of hope. Community rises against HOA bullying." As I read it, the detective called again. "Just got word," he said. Karen's been officially charged, and the HOA board's assisting the prosecution. They're done protecting her. I looked through the window into my daughter's room. She was laughing with her mom, her color returning, her heart monitor steady green again, and I realized, for the first time since moving into that neighborhood, justice was no longer something I had to chase. It had finally come home. The courthouse lobby was packed. Journalists, neighbors, and even a few city officials who'd once pretended not to notice Karen's power trips. Now they were here to watch the mighty HOA queen face her own judgment. Karen sat at the defense table in a gray suit that did little to hide the exhaustion on her face. The woman who once marched through our neighborhood like a dictator now looked small, lost in the very rules she used to wield against others. When the bailiff called the room to order, the hum of whispers died. The judge entered, stern, deliberate. "We are here to hear the case of State versus Karen Whitmore on charges of assault, endangerment of a minor, and harassment." Karen's lawyer started his defense immediately. "Your Honor," he said smoothly, "my client never intended harm. She was performing her duties under HOA policy. The child's medical condition, while tragic, was unforeseeable." Unforeseeable? I rose, my hands shaking. She was warned. "Multiple times!" The judge raised a hand to silence the room, but his eyes softened toward me. "Mr. Hall, I've reviewed your testimony and the video evidence. You'll have your turn." When the video played on the courtroom screen, no one breathed. Karen's voice echoed across the chamber. "You're not special. Rules are rules." Then the moment Lily's heart monitor alarmed, the sound sharp and haunting. The image of my daughter collapsing hit like a punch to the gut. Karen's head dropped. Even her attorney couldn't look up. The prosecutor stepped forward. "Your Honor, this wasn't enforcement. It was cruelty. Ms. Whitmore's obsession with control led to a medical emergency that nearly cost a child her life, and this footage proves she knew exactly what she was doing." Karen stood abruptly. "I didn't know she'd get sick," she cried. "I didn't mean for—" "Sit down, Ms. Whitmore," the judge said coldly. "You meant to humiliate them, and you did." When it was my turn to speak, I walked to the stand, palms sweating, heart pounding. "I served this country for 20 years in law enforcement," I began, "but I've never seen a person abuse authority the way she did. My daughter's heart is patched together with titanium and hope, and this woman thought her HOA code was more important than human life." The courtroom stayed silent. Even the reporters stopped typing. When I stepped down, I glanced at Karen. For a moment, her mask cracked completely. Fear, regret, and shame, all flickering through her eyes. After a long pause, the judge delivered his verdict. "For assault, endangerment, and harassment, this court sentences you, Ms. Whitmore, to 2 years of probation, mandatory community service, and permanent removal from any HOA position. Additionally, you are ordered to pay full restitution for the victim's medical expenses." Karen's knees buckled. "Please, Your Honor, Enough," the judge said firmly. "You need to learn compassion, something you clearly lacked." As the gavel struck, reporters surged forward. Flashes went off like lightning. Karen was escorted out, her eyes empty. Her name, once whispered in fear, now spat in disgust. Outside, neighbors waited with signs. "We stand with Lily." They cheered softly as I carried my daughter down the courthouse steps, her small hand gripping mine. The same world that once turned a blind eye now saw everything, and justice, for once, wasn't just served. It was witnessed. Outside the courthouse, the fall air felt sharper, cleaner somehow. Crowds were still gathered, cameras flashing, but this time it wasn't chaos. It was closure. Lily stood beside me, her small hand wrapped in mine, her heart monitor now just a quiet accessory instead of a lifeline. The cheers from neighbors and supporters rose around us, a sound she hadn't heard in years, the sound of people standing with her, not against her. Across the plaza, Karen was led toward the courthouse exit by 2 deputies. No cuffs this time, just humiliation. Her gray suit hung loose, her hair undone, her once perfect posture broken. The reporters swarmed her. "Ms. Whitmore, do you have anything to say to the family?" one asked. Karen stopped for a second, eyes darting toward us, her voice cracked. "I didn't mean for this to happen. I was just doing my job." I stepped forward slowly, stopping a few feet away. "Your job," I said, loud enough for the cameras to hear, "was to build a community, not destroy families." She flinched like the words hit harder than any verdict. My wife joined me, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "You nearly killed a child because you wanted control. Now you get to live every day remembering her face." Karen's mouth opened, but nothing came out. The weight of her own guilt silenced her at last. She turned away as the deputies guided her down the steps and into a waiting car. The cameras followed her, but for once, she wasn't the headline. Lily was. Later that evening, as the news replayed, the footage, the anchor's voice filled our living room. Former HOA President Karen Whitmore removed from office and ordered to pay restitution following public outrage over the incident involving heart patient Lily Hall. The screen cut to a photo of Lily smiling at her hospital bed surrounded by balloons. My wife leaned her head on my shoulder. "We did it," she whispered. I smiled faintly. "No," I said. "She did." Because it was true. Lily's courage had turned our pain into something powerful. Her story had forced people to look at the darker side of authority, to question the Karens hiding behind titles and rules. That night, as I tucked her into bed, she asked softly, "Is Mrs. Karen still mad at me?" I brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. "No, sweetheart. She's just learning what it feels like to face consequences." Lily smiled sleepily. "Good. Maybe she'll be nice next time." I kissed her forehead, whispering, "That's my girl." Outside, the night was still, peaceful. For the first time since moving into Cedar Ridge, there were no complaints, no stares, no noise, just the sound of quiet justice settling over the neighborhood. And standing there in that silence, I realized, some battles aren't fought with weapons. They're fought with truth, and love strong enough to outlast hate. Spring came early that year, and with it, peace we hadn't felt in a long time. The neighborhood that once felt suffocating was suddenly alive again, laughter echoing. From porches, kids riding bikes down the same street where sirens once screamed. Cedar Ridge was finally breathing again. Karen's house sat empty now. The HOA board had dissolved her position permanently, and the community voted to replace her with a new system, one based on kindness, not control. The sign out front had been repainted by the neighbors themselves. "Welcome to Cedar Ridge, a place where everyone belongs." Lily was stronger than ever. Her cheeks had color again, her laughter effortless. She started a small blog from her hospital bed during recovery. Heart of the neighborhood. It wasn't about pain. It was about hope. She wrote posts about empathy, forgiveness, and how rules mean nothing if they forget the people they're made for. Within weeks, her words spread farther than any HOA notice ever had. One morning, the mail brought a thick envelope addressed to her. Inside was a letter from the city mayor, inviting her to speak at a community kindness event. The mayor wrote, "Your bravery reminded us that compassion must always lead law." When Lily read it, she looked up at me with that shy little grin. "Dad," she said, "does that mean we get to have another party?" I laughed. "Only if you promise not to invite the police this time." We held that second party a few weeks later. Small, quiet, beautiful. No noise complaints, no fear. Just neighbors who'd once been strangers bringing food, flowers, and hugs. Halfway through, Mrs. Patel, one of the older residents, stood and said softly, "Lily brought light back to this place." I looked around and realized she was right. What started as tragedy had somehow turned into healing, not just for us, but for everyone who'd lived under Karen's shadow. As the sun began to set, Lily released a single balloon into the sky. It drifted upward, catching the orange glow. "For everyone who's ever been bullied," she said quietly. I watched it rise until it disappeared into the clouds. In that moment, I felt something deeper than relief. Closure. Karen had tried to break us, but in doing so, she'd exposed something powerful. The strength of a community united by empathy. That night, as I tucked Lily in, she whispered, "Dad, do you think she'll ever change?" I paused. "I hope so, because forgiveness is the only thing stronger than fear." She smiled, eyes closing, heartbeat steady. And for the first time in years, our house, our lives, felt completely, peacefully whole.